I've taught almost 30,000 people how to learn more efficiently, and one of the most common things they tell me is that they regret leaving it so late. Whether you have been struggling to get better grades, or to get that job promotion, or to learn that new skill, learning to learn is the thing that makes this all easier. Learning to learn helps you get better results with less time and stress. Most people know this, but what most people don't know is that by the time you realize you need to start learning to learn, it's already too late. And there are 3 reasons this happens. In this video, I'll share what those reasons are and some surprisingly simple strategies to help you avoid that common regret. The first reason is something I call the Readiness Trap. Back in my second year of medical school, we were studying for this exam, and the night before the exam, one of my friends messages me and he says, "Hey, I'm feeling really unprepared for this exam. I don't think I'm gonna do very well. What can I do?" And I gave him the same advice that I had given to myself that night, which was lower your expectations. And even though I was joking, there is some truth to that. At some point, it's going to be too late to change the outcome. So if we leave learning to learn until the night before the exam, that's obviously too late. But at what point does it become too late? And the problem that I've realized as a learning coach after so many years is that point comes much earlier than most people realize. So here's how most people think about when it is time to start learning to learn. So let's say that this red line here, this is when you need a skill. This could be for an exam or something to do with work. Well, then usually you're gonna feel that you need this sometime before you actually need it. So let's say here is where you feel the need. But the thing is that there is a time that it takes to develop a skill. And so for learning to learn, this time may actually be longer than you realize. You're not only spending time to build new habits, and you're not only spending time to unlearn old habits, which can often take longer, there's also time to even realize what your current habits are to start unlearning or replacing them. And so actually, the time it takes to learn this skill may be this long. Which means in reality, the best time to start learning is here. This is the ideal time to start. And all of this time from here to here is too late. So you can see that by the time you feel the need to develop the skill, it is way too late. And this is because the way the human brain works is that things that are more urgent and more short-term feel emotionally more important. The human brain is very bad at assessing the importance of long-term things. And most complex skills are a long-term investment. So if your cue to start working on something is that you feel emotionally that you are ready and that there is a need and there is a sense of urgency, it is almost certainly already too late. This is why I call this the readiness trap. It is a trap to start working on something only when you feel ready to start working on it. So what do you do instead? Instead of deciding when to start working on something based on how much time you think you have left, which falls into this trap, make that decision based on whether you see symptoms of problems. For example, let's say that your learning skills aren't quite up to scratch. And so a symptom that you see is that your memory and your retention is pretty low. After a week, you're forgetting 50, 70% of what you've learned, and you're spending a lot of time relearning. So that could be another symptom. The time that you're needing to spend is very high, and you can tell that the time you're spending is relearning. Sometimes what you might find is that you're doing a lot of things to try to deepen your understanding, but not very effectively. So you struggle with achieving a certain level of depth. So these are all symptoms of the underlying root problem, which is that your learning skill is not adequate. You can test your memory after a week, and you can see after just 1 or 2 weeks how good your memory and your depth is. You can assess objectively how much time you're spending and whether that time is being spent on relearning stuff, just plugging in holes in your memory. And this usually precedes that feeling of urgency by weeks or even months. So you start treating it when you first notice the symptoms, not when you are hospitalized or ready for the disease. And so there are really two things that you need to do here to avoid the readiness trap. The first thing is to start treating the symptoms when you see the symptoms. And the second thing is to start paying attention to the symptoms. Assess actively how effective your current strategies are. Don't just do things and then wait for an exam result to tell you that something's going wrong. Now, if you've watched my other videos, you'll know that learning to learn is actually surprisingly quite complicated. And it can be very confusing to know where you actually start to improve your learning skills. And a great place to start is by taking the free quiz that I've created for you. This asks you a bunch of questions and it maps out your current learning system, and it tells you if there are any glaring holes or red flags that are holding you back. At the end of the quiz, you get a personalized report that tells you where you should start working on. It points out your weak areas. And so if you're already feeling some of these symptoms of ineffective learning, but you're not sure how you actually start fixing those things, then this quiz is a great place to start. Again, it's free. I'll leave a link in the description for you. Now, one general rule that I always recommend is a great place to start on is anything that creates learning debt. And this is actually also the second reason a lot of people leave learning to learn way too late. So reason number 2, learning debt. So a year later, in my third year of medical school, I was deep in the trenches of trying to learn more effectively and still figuring out a lot of stuff. And I remember the first semester of my third year really trying to lock in to my learning skills. And every single day I had this list of stuff that I needed to tick off to make sure that I was on top of my learning. And the funny thing is that at the end of the first semester exams, I realized that I had actually completely forgotten about an entire paper. I seriously only realized that there was an entire paper that I had never attended any lectures for and never studied until 72 hours before the actual exam. And so I woke up at like 8 a.m. and I started studying. I studied through the night and then like an entire day of studying to do a 60-hour non-stop stretch of studying for this paper to sit the exam. And I got like a C or a C plus or something. It was the only C that I had gotten in university. And this was a really important experience for me because I realized that my methods were still not enough. And I'd been seeing studying as just ticking this box and hitting this number. Like I have so many flashcards to do, like 400 flashcards to do today. I have to make sure I do all of those flashcards today. And if I tick that number off, then I feel good, like I'm making progress. I was on this hamster wheel of studying, and I tricked myself into thinking that as long as I'm on the hamster wheel, I must be progressing. And this is exactly how learning debt accumulates. Learning debt is basically when you study something a certain way today, which actually gives you more work to do in the future. So for me, one of my biggest pieces of learning debt was making flashcards. I would make flashcards, let's say on a Monday, and I'd make this huge batch of flashcards. And then so I'm not really learning anything by making the flashcards and spending that time. I'm just giving the learning to my future self to deal with. And so my future self is constantly bombarded with more and more things for it to do. And it builds this big long checklist of stuff to complete in order for me to learn. And this debt compounds over time. The inefficiency of not being able to learn something properly today means that every single day I give more and more work to the future me, which means future me has less and less time available and is more and more overwhelmed. And on any given day, I'm already today pretty overwhelmed. So by giving even a little bit to my future self, that's already too much. So how is this concept of accumulating learning debt related to leaving learning to learn too late? It's because it creates this double burden. Here's the reason why learning debt is so dangerous. The issue with the double burden is that every single day you have too much work you need to do because you have to clear this learning debt that your past self gave to you. Now, in order to remove this work, you have to actually accumulate less learning debt, which means you have to start learning to learn more effectively. The more you can learn effectively today, the less work there is for your future self. But like we've just talked about with the Readiness Trap, it takes time to learn this skill. And so by giving ourselves so much work to do every single day, it also reduces the amount of time we have available to basically sharpen the axe. So learning to learn time goes down. And because we're not learning to learn, we're just constantly accumulating more and more learning debt, which means that we've got more and more work to do, which means we've got less and less time. So this spiral just goes out of control until every single day we can't do anything other than just clear the log of stuff we need to get through, knowing that it's probably not good enough, knowing we need to improve our methods, but not having any time left to actually fix it. This is a situation where you've left the hole in your boat for so long that so much water has come into the boat, you do not have time to patch the hole because you have to keep bucketing the water out, otherwise you're gonna drown inside the boat. And when that happens, either you magically become much faster at bucketing, which doesn't happen, or you have to abandon ship. And this is what I see all the time. People who start learning to learn too late, only when they feel like they need it, and then they at the same time have so much learning debt they've accumulated, they don't actually have time to learn because they're too busy, even though the reason they're busy is because their methods are ineffective in the first place. And now they're not going to do well for their upcoming exam. They don't have time to improve on it. So you have to just abandon ship and forget about that exam. You just accept this exam is forfeit. I will try again next time. I'll try again next year. I'm going to resit it. And the sadder part is that a lot of the time, people still don't realize that they fell into these traps. And so they just repeat the exact same mistake all over again. They say, the reason I didn't do well before is I just didn't study hard enough. And they just spend more time and more effort into studying hard, and then they just make the exact same mistakes, and they only start thinking about learning to learn when it is again too late. Because ironically, by leaving it so late that you fail an exam and forcing yourself to resit it, suddenly it's not urgent anymore because the exam is another year away. Sorry, I need to calm down. But this is very frustrating as a learning coach, and this is why I want to make this video. So how do you solve this learning debt issue? The first thing is you have to be honest with yourself. You have to understand and accept that what you are doing right now is accumulating learning debt, and you have to make a change. So step one is be honest. A lot of people just deny the problem and they just focus on doing more hard work because doing more hard work is actually easy. But if you want to see whether there are places where you're accumulating learning debt, then try to just write down your learning flow. Write down step by step in as much detail as you can how you are learning and how effective you think those methods are. And look at which steps, which processes and methods are actually effective and which are just creating more work for yourself and spending time when you actually don't think they're helpful or you don't even know why you do it. And if you try to make this learning flow and you struggle to even write down what you're doing and articulate what your learning methods and processes are, there is almost a 100% chance that something there is creating learning debt because you don't even know what you're doing. Because what are the chances that you are doing something that you cannot even articulate that is also optimally efficient? And again, if you need some help to figure out and map your learning system and you're not sure exactly where to start, that quiz will also help you with that. So again, that's in the description. Now, once you've done that and you've been honest and you've realized that there are places that you might be accumulating learning debt, the next thing is to just patch the holes. It's a gradual process. I talk about it in a lot of my other videos, how you can patch different types of holes. But here's the thing. You might have just listened to me explain to you about learning debt and this readiness trap, and you understand that you need to start working on it now. But the reason you can't is because you already have so much learning debt. You're already in that position. You already feel like you're too busy. You don't have enough time to invest in this. And that is actually the third reason. And I call this one the Mount Fuji trap. There's this common proverb that says, the man who moves Mount Fuji starts with a single stone. And it's a proverb about how you can achieve massive things just by doing it step by step. The Mount Fuji trap is when you think that you'll only solve your problems with learning by moving the entire mountain. And because it seems like it's going to take too long, it feels overwhelming, you don't even start, you don't even try. But in reality, the person who starts moving stones is making more progress than the person who doesn't. And the key is to understand that your success isn't based on whether you move the mountain or not. It's based on how many stones you moved. With learning to learn, I'll be honest, getting to the best you can be will take years. And getting to a point where your learning system is so good that you've eliminated learning debt could take a very long time. But any improvement you make relative to you right now is an improvement. You have less problems to deal with than you did yesterday. What matters is not how good you are compared to your potential. What matters is how good you are compared to how you were before. And in reality, let's say you think that your biggest bottleneck right now is your focus and your concentration. And you think that that's only a 2 out of 10. Getting this to a 10 out of 10, yeah, this is gonna take you months or years. However, if you just get to a 4 out of 10, which you might be able to do in 1 to 2 weeks, you have doubled your focus and concentration. And if there's this really difficult exam or this ambitious job promotion you're aiming for, you probably don't need to be 10 out of 10 for everything. For all you know, all you need to be is just 10 to 20% better than you are now. And you will feel that in your quality of life through more free time, more confidence, less stress, less volatility in your results, better sleep, more time for hobbies. Every stone you move makes your life better. So how do you avoid the Mount Fuji trap? Step 1, recognize that there's only 2 paths. You can either choose to start incrementally improving with the risk that it might not be good enough by the time you need to. You may have already left it too late. Or you cannot start improving and it will definitely be too late. On one hand, there is definite failure, and on the other hand, there is possibility of success. And once you recognize that, we move on to step 2, which is to really just start. And how I recommend you just start is to pick something that you think is holding you back. Think about one thing that you're doing right now that you think you could do better. Write that down. You can write it down literally right now. And all you need to do is just think about one small change, one small idea or experiment that might make that better, and commit to doing that today. And I want you to actually do this right now because I want this video to actually impact your actions, not just how you think about it. I don't want you to get to it being too late and then realize, oh yeah, Justin was right in that video I watched 2 months ago. You don't need to know how to solve the problem. You don't need to know what the perfect action is or to know how to make the perfect change. But you do have to take an action and you have to make some change. And give yourself the best chance at success by making it specific, make it realistic, and make it achievable. Don't just say, my action to commit to today is get better at learning. That's too vague. Be specific, be detailed. Take the time to think about this, pick your action, and then commit to it. And remember, big changes come from tiny actions done often. So these are the 3 reasons why most people leave it too late. And if you want some ideas on something to commit to and get started with, then you can check out this video right here. I recently found out that the cards can be placed anywhere on the video. I thought it only appeared in like one of the corners or anything. So I've decided that today it's just going to be straight over my face.